excavate and build sanctuary for dragons. Send your adventurer to gather resources in the game inspired by Wingspan, Wyrmspan.
And today we'll be teaching you how to play Wyrmspan, game designed by Connie Fogelman and developed by Elizabeth Hargrave and published by Stonemaier Games.
And hello everyone, it's Stella.
And Tarrant here from Meeple University.
Alright, let's go to the classroom.
In Wyrmspan, players are amateur dracologists trying to entice the best hordes of dragons to their caves. Over 4 rounds of play, players will excavate caves to make space to house dragons, and will manage resources and eggs, all in the aim of gaining points. Whoever can score the most points over 4 rounds of play will be the winner. Wyrmspan is very much a spiritual successor to the bird collecting game Wingspan, and if you're familiar with Wingspan, then much of what you're about to see will feel familiar. However, Wyrmspan is its own game with an overall different set of rules to its predecessor. This video will be a complete teach with no pre-assumed knowledge of Wingspan required. To set up, give each player a player mat and 10 wooden pieces in player colour. Your adventurer meeple begins on base camp. Set up these 3 central boards within reach of all players. The round board tracks the 4 rounds of the game. Place the round marker on round 1, and then shuffle up the double-sided end of round public objective tiles and place one underneath each round. On the Dragon Guild board, choose one of the 4 Dragon Guild overlay tiles and then place it on the side which matches your player count. Place each player's guild token on the start space. Next to the card display board, shuffle up the decks of larger dragon cards and smaller cave cards and deal 3 of each face up into the display. Now each player takes a hand of 3 cards of each type, looks at them and chooses a total of 4 cards to keep in any combination, discarding the other 2 to face up discard piles. Make general stocks of the 4 types of resources: meat, crystals, milk and gold. Having seen their own starting cards, each player now chooses 3 starting resources in any combination, adding them to their personal supplies. Separately, make a general stock of coins, and players take 6 coins to their personal supplies as starting coins. Although they're both circular tokens, be clear that coins are not considered resources. Any effect which refers to resources cannot be substituted for coins and vice versa. And this icon, which refers to any one of the 4 resources, does not include coins. Make a general stock of eggs. For aesthetic reasons, these come in 7 different colours, but all eggs are equivalent. Each player begins with 1 egg, which is placed not in your supply, but on one of these 2 egg nest spaces on your player board. At the beginning of the game, you cannot hold more than 2 eggs. None of the resources, eggs or coins are intended to be limited, and if you run out of components, use these multipliers as a substitute. Randomly choose a first player who takes the first player token, and you're now ready to play. Wyrmspan is played in 4 rounds, and each round is played in turns, starting from the first player and going clockwise around the table. On your turn, you'll take one of 3 actions. Excavate, which is to play a cave card from your hand onto your board. Entice, which is to play a dragon card from your hand onto your board. Or Explore, which is to choose one of the 3 caves on your board and activate the various effects you've unlocked. Each time you take an action, move your adventurer to that action space. This will help you to keep track of which action you're taking. Actions will have a cost in coins, eggs and resources. Any coins or eggs contributing to the cost of your action should be kept on the action space. Resources are returned to the general stock. Once you've finished your action, return your adventurer to base camp. This means you can freely take the same action on consecutive turns. In addition to this main action, you may, at any time and any number of times, convert any 2 resources, matching or non-matching, for any 1 other resource. At the end of your turn, you have a limit of 9 total resources, 9 coins, and 9 total cards in hand. So if you're above any of these limits, you must now discard down to 9. Play will then pass to the next player clockwise. Every action you take costs at least 1 coin, so as a round goes on, your supply of coins will dwindle. If, when it comes to your turn, you cannot afford to or otherwise don't wish to take an action, then you pass. Your turn is skipped for the rest of this round. Once all players have passed, you'll resolve the end of round sequence. You'll resolve end of round effects showing this icon, score this round's end of round objective, refresh the card display, and refill each player with 6 new coins and an egg. You'll pass the first player marker and proceed to the next round. The game will end after 4 rounds, and whoever amasses the most points, represented by this icon, will be the winner. So now let's have a look at each action in detail. The first action is Excavate, and here you'll be playing a cave card from your hand into an empty space on your board. Choose one of your cave cards and choose one of your 3 caves. You'll place this card in the leftmost open slot of that cave. Do note, the colour of the cave card doesn't matter. Although this is yellow, it can still be placed in any one of the 3 caves. You must always fill your caves from left to right. The cost to take this action is always 1 coin, plus a number of eggs depending on which of the 3 columns you excavate. Your first column comes pre-excavated, your second column costs no eggs, the third column costs 1, and the fourth column costs 2. So for this excavation, I would spend 1 egg. Next, resolve the when played ability of the cave card that you've placed. Every cave card has one of these abilities indicated by this icon when you play the card, and you gain whatever is shown on that card. Here it's a crystal and a milk. When you excavate in the 4th column, there are 2 when played effects, the one on the card and the one that you cover. The covered ones all give you a way to spend cards or resources to gain coins, and you may resolve your 2 when played effects in either order. You'll be excavating for 2 main reasons. Firstly, to create space for dragons in your caves. You won't be allowed to place dragons onto a space which hasn't been excavated. And secondly, because the when played abilities are a pretty important source of resources and bonuses. The second action is Entice. And here you'll play a dragon card from your hand into the leftmost excavated unoccupied space in any one of your 3 caves. The cost to take this action is always 1 coin plus whatever resources, coins or eggs are showing in the top left corner of the card you play. Be aware that does mean that if a card has a coin cost, it's going to cost you 2 coins to take this action. Each dragon has 1 or more preferred habitats, which restricts which row of your player board you can play it to. For example, this dragon could be played into any one of your 3 caves. This one could only be played into the Golden Grotto. Each card has 5 other pieces of information. Here is the number of victory points you score at the end of the game for having played this dragon. Below that is the size, which could be large, medium, small or hatchling. And in the bottom right is its trait, which could be shy, helpful, playful or aggressive. These have no innate effect, but they often combo with other cards' abilities, or form a key part of the end of round objectives. Next, below the size, you may see a number of these grey egg nest icons. Remember that at the start of the game, your player board had a capacity to store only 2 eggs. But now, once you've played dragons who come with nest icons, you'll later be able to store eggs on them when you gain those eggs. And I'll explain more about the particulars of managing your eggs a little bit later. Finally, each dragon has an ability printed at the bottom of its card. These come in 4 types, each indicated by an icon. This one, which we also saw on the cave cards, is a when played ability. You would resolve this effect immediately upon playing the card and then never resolve it again. The clock icon is an end of round ability. You resolve it once per round in this phase after all players have passed. The flag is an end-of-game scoring objective. You'll resolve this only at the end of the game, adding to your final score if you meet the objective. And an ability showing the adventurer icon is activated during a turn when you take the explore action, and that's what we'll look at now. When you explore, you don't move your adventurer to the explore space. Instead, you choose one of your 3 caves which you're going to explore and place the explorer at its entrance. Pay the cost based on whether this is the first, second, or third time you've explored this cave in this round. Your first time exploring costs a coin, your second time costs a coin and an egg, and your third would cost a coin and 2 eggs. You can't explore a cave more than 3 times per round. Be clear, these icons are egg costs. They are not egg nests. You cannot store eggs here for future use. You'll now move that adventurer, step by step, from left to right across that cave until you reach a stop sign. As you progress, you'll activate each activation ability which you come across. So right now I would gain a resource, gain a crystal, gain a guild step, gain nothing from this card because it's not a when activated effect, gain another resource, and then stop. Once you stop, your action is over and you return your adventurer to base camp. This is where you'll build up your abilities across the course of the game. At the very beginning, you'll only get a single benefit out of each of these explorations. But every dragon you place unlocks both its ability and the next ability printed on your board. So now let's have a look at the different types of abilities. Cards may have one or more abilities on them to resolve, and each ability is optional. Cards may simply grant you resources, in which case take them from the general stock and add them to your personal supply. Remember that at the end of your turn you must discard down to 9 resources, and at any time you can exchange 2 resources for another 1. Abilities may let you gain cards, either cave or dragon cards. Unless otherwise stated, a gained card may come from the face-up display of 3 or from the top of the deck. If an effect tells you to draw rather than gain, then it must come from the top of the deck. Remember, you may hold at most 9 total cards at the end of your turn and must discard down to 9 if you're above. And empty spaces in the card display created on your turn are not refilled until the end of your turn. If an ability lets you lay an egg, then take an egg from the general stock and then place it onto any valid nest space which doesn't already contain an egg. Unless otherwise stated, this can be anywhere on your player board. In some cases there'll be a restriction. Here, for example, it requires you to lay an egg into the card's cave, so it would have to go on a dragon card in the same row. As the game goes on, you'll be storing eggs across your player board and your dragon cards in various combinations. And any time you take an action which requires an egg to be spent, unless otherwise stated, you may take that egg from anywhere on your board. Eggs are an important part of the costs that you'll need to take various actions, but they're also a way of gaining points, as every egg left in a nest at game's end will score you 1 point. 2 important point scoring abilities are caching and tucking. Caching involves storing a resource token on a dragon card. In this case, you would take any resource from your personal supply and cache it on the dragon. A cached resource takes no further part in the game, in that you won't be able to spend that as a resource ever again. You'll simply build up the cache over time, and each cached resource will be worth 1 point at the end of the game. Tucking works in a similar way, but for dragon cards. In this instance, I draw a dragon card from the deck, flip it face down, and slide it underneath a dragon in a cave. The tucked card takes no further part in the game. You'll never resolve the tucked card's abilities, and any of its traits have no impact on play or objectives. But again, you'll collect them over time, and each tucked card will score you 1 point at the end of the game. Much like laying eggs, caching and tucking, if not otherwise stated, can be done on any dragon on your player board. Although for card abilities it's much more common to say cache or tuck here, meaning on or under the card, which triggered the action. Also be aware that the actions at the far end of each row provide some very efficient ways to cache, tuck, or lay eggs, and are a great way of converting leftover cards and resources to points. This shield represents the Dragon's Guild, and when you gain a shield, advance your marker one step clockwise around the Dragon Guild board, gaining any benefit whose space you enter. When your marker enters either of the brown spaces at the top or bottom of the track, then take one of your coloured cubes and add it to an empty space on the guild tile. Any number of markers may go in this elongated space. Doing this either gives you an immediate ability which you can resolve, or some end of game points. You may have at most 4 of your markers on this tile. If you were ever to place a 5th, you simply gain no benefit. Some effects involve revealing a card. When this happens, take the top card from the relevant deck and show it to all players. The ability will then generally tell you to take a different course of action depending on the traits of the card that was just drawn. Some abilities allow you and your opponents to gain a benefit. If an ability has you resolve multiple steps, resolve them as separate steps, finishing the first before proceeding to the second. Finally, if an effect has multiple parts, then you'll resolve each of them one after the other as a completely standalone action. As we saw before, there are 4 different sizes of dragon: large, medium, small, and hatchling. And there are actually some pretty significant differences between the hatchlings and all of the other sizes. For the small, medium, and large dragons, the extra costs are always a combination of coins, meat, gold, and crystals. For hatchlings, it's always eggs and milk. Then, all hatchlings have a 3-part ability. The first part will involve caching or tucking. The second part will give you a benefit each time you cache or tuck on that card. And this applies whether you're doing it from the first ability on the card, or if it's triggered by any other means. And the third part will give you a specific once-off benefit the third time you cache or tuck on that card. You can still keep caching or tucking beyond the third, and you will continue to gain the second benefit on the card, but you won't trigger the third benefit again. Once all players have passed, you'll proceed to the end of the round. Firstly, any coins and eggs which were paid as part of the costs of actions are returned to the general stock. Next, in turn order, starting from the first player and going clockwise, each player activates all of their end of round effects on dragons. Meaning that first the first player activates each of their end of round dragons in any order, then the second player resolves all of theirs, and so on. Now score the current round's objective. Here, for example, it goes to the player with the most large dragons, and whoever has the most would place one of their score markers on this top row. Second most would go in the second row, third most in the third row, and all others on the bottom. Ties are super friendly, so if multiple players tied for first, they would all go in the first row, and the next place player would still get to claim second. However, if you don't meet the objective at all, for example if you had no large dragons, then you would automatically score 0. Ignore these numbers, they're used only in the solo game. Then refresh the card displays, discarding and replacing all 6 cards. Give each player 6 coins and 1 egg, adding those coins to any the player had left over if they passed early. Rotate the first player marker 1 step clockwise, and proceed to the next round. After scoring the 4th round objective, the game is over and you'll proceed to final scoring. You'll score points in each of these categories. First, score points for any endgame scoring markers you've placed on the guild tile. Score the raw points printed in the top right corner of each dragon you've played. Score the scoring objectives on any of your endgame dragon abilities. Gain a point for every one of your eggs, your cached resources, and your tucked cards. Score the points you've earned from the end of round public objectives. And finally, from your leftovers, score 1 point for every leftover coin, and 1 point for every 4 leftover total resources and cards. The player with the highest score wins. If tied, whoever has the most visible dragons on their player map breaks the tie, and if still tied, victory is shared. Wyrmspan comes with this handy book of dragon facts, which includes an entry for each of the cards in the game, telling you what it does and a little bit of information about the dragon itself. The game also comes with a solo mode, the rules for which are covered in this Automa book. And that's how to play Wyrmspan.
Thanks so much for watching. Your like and comments are much appreciated. Subscribe to see what's coming, and hopefully you have a wonderful day. See you next time.